We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to call this Monday, December 20th meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. We are meeting in hybrid, both in person as well as remotely via WebEx. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. We'll start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Tony, do you mind? You knew it. Thank you, Tony. We do have a proclamation this evening that I'd like to read at this time, if you just bear with me. It's an Arbor Day Proclamation, which we read every year. And so I'll begin. Whereas natural areas, trees, and landscapes provide not only community beautification, but also economic and environmental benefits. And whereas trees provide many benefits to the community, including air purification, windbreaks, noise reduction, shade, and energy savings. And whereas planting trees and maintaining older trees provides an opportunity for community interaction, volunteerism, economic development, and environmental conservation. And whereas our efforts to improve the environmental benefit present and future generations. And whereas Arbor Day in Montana is officially the last day of Friday in April. Therefore, I, John Mulfeld, Mayor of Whitefish, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 20th, 2021, I guess this is a late one, as Arbor Day, and encourage citizens to participate in appropriate activities and to take advantage of the benefits of the park and other natural areas in our community. I don't know why that's being read tonight, but anyway, April 29th was Arbor Day, and thanks for your attention. We will go to public communications. Are there any comments from the public this evening? Other than the public hearings, which I will call, and you can comment on those specifically. It's a typo, so it is April 29th, 2022. Yeah.
Does make sense that Arbor Day would be in the spring.
Yeah.
Not a lot of shade from the trees. Good evening, Council. My name is Ruben Castron with Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main Street. I am discussing our curbside recycling proposal, which has been on the agenda for the last several meetings and is not on this agenda under public comment, but there are communications from city staff as well as a letter from one of the contractors in regards, and I would like to present citizens' comments which we submitted earlier in written form, briefly verbally as well. First of all, thank you all, including city staff, for how much work you're putting into this. It is an important thing that I think is often sort of trivialized, but curbside recycling is very difficult to implement. Secondly, we appreciate that it appears the council is moving to implement a bear-proof and animal-proof curbside recycling as well as trash. That being said, we believe that this implementation discussion of last meeting will significantly increase the cost as well as the scope of this proposal, and therefore the city and city staff should rebid this program. We think this would enable for a more cost-effective rollout to make sure that other contractors that once bid on a fairly different proposal last spring have the option to bid again and keep it competitive with the changes made. Furthermore, since citizens' last comments, we've become aware of 2 lawsuits that appear to be being brought against Republic Services, the contractor, which was initially in negotiations with the city, from issues that have arisen with their recycling programs in other parts of the state and other parts of the country. We submitted some comments as well as references to these in written comments. Again, make no assertions of the validity of these claims, but simply hope that City Council will have city staff, especially the legal team, look into these and learn from these past conflicts so that the contract and the proposal that is moved forward avoids these issues. Additionally, in our comments, we bring up issues of this robust public education that is needed for a successful recycling program. We address this again, believe that if the city rebids the program, they can make sure that these issues are included. Specifically, it's very beneficial if the city is aware of its inbound contamination rate of recyclable materials. This is the contamination of actual truckloads going to a material repurposing facility, as opposed to the contamination of just the material at that facility as the contract was originally proposed. This inbound contamination rate allows for much more targeted public education, which will help with the actual effective rollout of this program. The other thing we really think the city needs to look at is making sure you tighten up language regarding who has to pay for excluded waste that is collected. I know we've brought this up previously, but again, rebidding this proposal can allow you to make sure that the contractor has to pay for this excluded waste and not the city. At the very least, at least get the contractor to provide an estimate of what this might cost the city, so there's not just this completely unfunded budget line, which could end up costing the city and the residents an unknown amount of money. Finally, it's good to be explicitly clear about what material is actually being recycled. The amendments to city code at last meeting indicated that number 1 and 2 recyclables would all be collected in single stream. We encourage you to work with the material repurposing facility to make sure that those materials can actually be recycled. Several repurposing facilities around the valley can't recycle 1 and 2 plastics that are for clamshells or solid colored plastics. If they're still being collected and then brought there, those will have to be taken to the dump and increase costs of the whole program. So please regard our comments. Once again, thank you. We encourage you to work hard on this, and yeah, please, thanks. Have a good
Thanks. Further public comment tonight on items not advertised as a public hearing? We'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports? How about the council? Frank? No? With that said, you do have the consent agenda on your agenda. We have the minutes from the previous meeting that need to be adopted. Any changes or additions to the minutes?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to remove Ordinance 2119 from the consent agenda for further discussion.
Okay, a motion to table does not get discussion.
It's the motion to remove it from the consent agenda. I'll get there.
Okay. There is a motion on the table that does not get a discussion. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Davis.
Thanks. In that, since we're going to be able to take that now, I would move to table Ordinance 2119 to date uncertain.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Quinnell. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We do need to provide Dana and staff some direction to that effect. Frank, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't mind at all. Dana, I think our concern, or my concern with this ordinance is that we probably do need to rebid our recycling, given the parameters that we put out last spring for it versus what we're being entertained now. I think it's the only right thing to do. That and several of the issues that I see with the contract probably need to be examined further. So if staff could move to rebid that, I think, and then we can go into further discussion on what a contract should look like, and how we might be able to manage the cost for the public for both the bear resistant containers as well as the cost of recycling. That would be really helpful.
Okay. Yeah, we will plan to rebid it. I think what we'll do is we'll bring the RFP back to council for you to review to ensure that we are all on the same page for what parameters you'd like us to request as part of that process. So number of years, obviously animal resistant, et cetera. And so, yeah, we'd be happy to do that. I think that, given the comment from Evergreen Disposal, that I'm very supportive of that decision, and we'll work on that in the new year.
Great. Thank you, Dana. We will move on to, well, now we do need a motion to approve the consent agenda, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to approve the remaining consent agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. I've neglected to remind the audience, this is Ryan's last meeting. So congratulations to Ryan. He's been a huge asset to this community the last 4 years. Further comments? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously, which brings us to our first public hearing, item 7A of the agenda, which is Ordinance 21-20, an ordinance amending Title 11 Zoning Regulations, Chapter 3 Special Provisions, and Section 35 Short-Term Rental Standards, and Chapter 9 Definitions of the Whitefish City Code. And this is WZTA 21-03, and it's a continuation from the December 6, 2021 public hearing, and the public hearing does remain open. Dave.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick recap since we went over the staff report at the last meeting. Just note that these potential changes to our short-term rental standards were directed by the City Council at a work session after a report provided by the Sustainable Tourism Master Plan Committee. And they recommended changing the definition of short-term rentals to 90 days. And so staff reviewed that and came up with an alternative to that, which would create a second terminology of medium-term rentals, which would be rentals from 30 to 90 days, specifically to tourists and remote workers, but not including month-to-month rentals for long-term housing for individuals or families, or rentals of less than 90 days to local workers. And those medium-term rentals don't require registration or a business license unless also being used as a short-term rental but they do have to meet our parking requirements, our zoning regulations, and they're relegated to the same zoning districts where short-term rentals are allowed, which is our resort zones and our WB3 downtown. As far as our short-term rental standards, we are beefing those up a little bit, adding more tools for enforcement, requiring registration, marketing standards, what needs to be on the advertisements, including their Whitefish registration number. And these changes did go to the planning board November 18th. They unanimously recommended for approval. We did receive a whole bunch of comments since the last meeting. I'm assuming you guys have all gotten those and had a chance to read those. Just one note, if you do have heartburn about regulating rentals in the 30 to 90 days, we could modify that existing ordinance to remove all references to that, because we'd still like to at least get the short-term rental standards updated or improved, or you could also consider reducing that to 60 days or some other option. But I'm not going to go through the whole staff report. I just wanted to give you that little update, and I'd be glad to answer any other questions you guys might have about this.
Certainly. Steve? Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I just want to be crystal clear on what this does. It would move pretty much all 30 to 90 day rentals to the resort residential zones.
Yep, unless they're being used for, long-term.
Okay, unless the idea is.
Yeah, they can do a 30-month, month-to-month lease if your intent is to continue to renting to the same individual or family.
And then, but enforcement of this would be driven by complaint, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, since we can't really do a registration, we can't charge resort tax for these, we're not having all the same standards as our short-term rental standards unless they're also using it as a short-term rental. But however, if we do get a complaint.
That would only be in a short-term residential.
Yeah, if someone's doing that in a zone that's only allows long-term residential use, or typical residential zones like the WR2 or R3.
Okay, so we get a complaint, who investigates this?
Well, right now we don't have a code enforcement person. We do look at our short-term rental stuff through our front desk. People are reviewing those things and checking up on them and writing letters. That's through our finance department.
And then what happens? I mean, do they have to show their?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
do you go into the building and see if it's fully furnished? Because there's reference to that. How do we?
I mean, that's one indicator that it'd be fully furnished. I mean, someone's not gonna short-term rental out a unfurnished home, most likely.
Does the person doing the investigation go into the unit?
No, we would be looking at whatever the ads are in general, if someone's advertising for that. If there's a complaint, we would, if somebody can show that it's a local worker that's working there, then I guess we would, allow that to continue, whoever's there. I mean.
But if it's a local worker, that's less than.
Yeah, somebody that's only here for
90
60 days that's working at the hospital, that wouldn't apply to that. Again, it's worded, it says tourists and remote workers. I mean, I don't know why we're necessarily differentiating between that, but we did feel like we didn't want to punish the, hospital and some of these other places that may rent or need employees for less than 90 days. And that's why possibly a 60-day, changing it from 90 to 60 might be an option.
Thanks, you answered my question, I appreciate it.
Rebecca.
So Dave, one question was the use of the midterm jargon, because it's not in state law. And Ben reminded me that that was used in Colorado when we were looking at that Gunnison study. So are we gonna have issues with introducing a new term?
I mean, we have some legal powers as a city. I think some of those questions might be best answered by Angie, but I do think we have the power to regulate that. There aren't many communities that are regulating that yet. It's kind of a new thing, but it's kind of the up and coming model of, there's a lot of people converting their short-term rentals into what we're calling medium-term rentals, just because, it's more stable. They don't have to change out, hire somebody to clean it every week. It can be, every other month or every couple months. And there's now new websites cropping up that are like Airbnb that are specifically for these medium-term rentals. So it's kind of a new thing, and so a lot of communities really haven't had a chance to find solutions and grapple with it.
But we could name it what we want, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the terminology's out there
Okay.
already.
And the second thing I ran by Angie was whether or not this would be considered a taking because of the taking away the right to make more money, I guess, on a nightly basis. But I was wondering if Angie could talk to that because numerous comments brought up issues sort of around that. And my interpretation was that Angie said that it's not applied if you're addressing future earnings in the law. And so I don't know if Angie could come on and. We see you, Angie.
We
Just
can't hear you, Angie.
Think you're muted.
Nope, still can't hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Hi, Rebecca, sorry, I'm sick, so I'm at home. Rebecca, I'm not necessarily worried about a takings claim because, I think that'd be far-fetched. What I'm more worried about is, state law that says that we can't be on the landlord to enact, regulate, landlords. And so, while I do think that we're, definitely a charter city with self-governing powers, I have concerns about telling landlords about how long they can rent places for. And again, I'm just very concerned about trying to enforce something like a midterm rental sort of thing. But I agree with Dave very strongly that even if you guys don't go down the road of wanting to regulate these midterm rentals, that the edit staff has proposed to enforce and beef up our enforcement of short-term rentals are definitely warranted.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Yeah, I did speak to two property managers just to understand from their perspective how.
This might be more appropriate after we have a motion on the table after the public hearing, if you don't mind.
Gosh, I'm sorry, John.
No,
you're
that's
right.
quite all right, but do you have any
Okay.
other questions for Dave? Or Angie?
Not right now.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca, appreciate that. Any questions for Dave from the council? Not seeing any, we'll go ahead to hold the public hearing, which is for ordinance 21-20, and we'll take that public hearing now. Any public testimony, please feel free to just step up, and for the record, your name and address, please.
My name is John Sinrud. I live in Kalispell, and I am the president of the Montana Landlord Association. So to go through your medium term and how you're defining what rentals are, you are actually interfering with tenant landlord law, which I've worked on for over 10 years, 12 years in the state of Montana. So under 7-1-111 sub 13, any power that applies to or affects landlords as defined under 70-24-103, when that power is intended to license landlords or to regulate their activities with regard to tenants beyond what is provided in Title 70, Chapter 24 and 25, it is prohibited unless you do it to literally everybody. And that's businesses and other residential units. You also have 70-1-113, which is consistency with state regulations required. So it says consistencies with state regulation required. A local government with self-government powers is prohibited the exercise of any power, any manner inconsistent with state law or the administrative regulation in any area effectively subjected by the law to state regulation or control. The state controls tenant landlord law. You don't. No city has the power to do that. It is defined under 70-24-103 that the definition for a rental, so you've got the definitions, you've got roomers, and that is a week to week. So if push comes to shove, you could have some issues in regards to roomers. A week to week rental, which is allowed, and it's got it defined here. Basically, it's like a boarding house. And then you also have 30-day or month-to-month rentals. That is allowed under the law. It is regulated by the state, period. And then you're also looking at the incongruent discussion of what we currently have in this proposal with 70-24-201, which again defines week-to-week rentals or month-to-month. And a week-to-week rental is a roomer. I would suggest that you remove anything with midterm, 30-day, and in fact, I would say 29 days because of February, but literally get rid of all of it. It cannot be regulated by the state. The Landlord Association has fought this in Bozeman, fought it in Butte, fought it in Billings, and they didn't do anything with it. I know that in either early 2000s or mid-90s, there was a lawsuit in Missoula where Missoula tried to license landlords and define them. And that was shot down in the courts. You also have SPE versus the City of Helena, which defines building permits and dealing with building codes. And the City of Helena wanted to go through and make sure in the WUI that anybody that was going to redo the roof, that they had to have basically a fire retardant roof system. Well, the individual happened to be a lawyer, sued the City of Helena, goes to the Supreme Court, and he said it is literally given the power and the plenary power of the state to regulate building permits. Therefore, I would suggest that the City of Whitefish doesn't even touch this. They remove anything dealing with 30-day rentals and licensing and regulation. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Hi, Linda Costain, long-term local. I just wanted to, not very prepared, but wanted to just voice my opinion against this. Myself and several other people have purchased houses over the years with the intent to retire and to use them as rentals, knowing we weren't in the short-term rental districts, but knowing that we could do 30 days. And when you change things that happen all the time, it's really frustrating. And I think that you're affecting a lot more of a local income than you are for, we work a lot in Bozeman. I've seen Bozeman. The money that's coming in is so much bigger that the rental, like trying to rent out your house to pay your mortgage, is not what these other landowners are trying to do. It's going to affect the locals, good or bad. I'd rather have a neighbor for 30 days that I get to know from someplace else that's interesting than to not have an income.
Thanks, Linda.
My name is Missy Schumer. My husband and I own 716 Birch Point Drive, and my father-in-law owns 718 Birch Point Drive. This property has been in our family for over 20 years, back when Whitefish was still Montana's best kept secret, and Birch Point Drive was still unpaved. And we certainly did not have a pedestrian bridge connecting us to City Beach in downtown, which is wonderful. Our home is zoned WR2, which is not a short-term district. 5-Star Rentals manages our property to ensure that we abide by all laws. We knew that we could not rent it more than we do now. The property directly across from us and across the river and across the pedestrian bridge is zoned the resort residential. We, along with all of you, have watched our beloved Whitefish change and grow. My husband and I both work in planning and engineering, and we know we have to address the challenges in infrastructure and housing. And we applaud your efforts for embracing being a place that depends on tourism, but also stays true to its roots. But this proposal is not the right solution for what we're trying to do. The proposed changes have been advertised as a way to limit or enforce short-term rentals. However, the proposed ordinance does not change the way properties in short-term districts are allowed to operate. They currently operate nightly, weekly, monthly, or however they want, as long as they are licensed. None of this will change if you adopt this ordinance. Perhaps you will get more enforcement, which we are all about, because there are certainly people who are operating short-term rentals outside of proper zones. The intended consequences of this ordinance have not been fully disclosed to the affected property owners in public notices or in the language of the ordinance itself. In order to realize the intent, we all had to read between the lines. Many of the homes located in WR2 and WR3 currently meet the criteria of what we've talked about tonight as medium-term rentals. They are fully furnished homes that are typically occupied by the homeowners, tourists, remote workers, seasonal workers, or temporary workers. Prohibiting homes from these areas from offering medium-term leases will leave many of those homes empty for large portions of the year, reducing revenue for the city and local businesses. This, again, does not address the affordable housing issue. The Sustainable Tourism Management Plan has several high-priority action items, none of which are addressed by this proposal, other than the enforcement issues. We respectfully request that the city not adopt this ordinance. To really address the problems we are trying to solve, we need a diverse group of people, including property managers, year-round and seasonal residents, and business owners to find a sustainable long-term solution. Thank you for allowing this conversation to continue and hearing our concerns.
Thank you.
Hello again, Ruben Castron, still representing Citizens for a Better Flathead. And I would like to remind City Council that Citizens for a Better Flathead has a fairly large membership base, several hundred of which reside in the city of Whitefish, and I'm here representing them in strong support of this proposal and appreciate the work that has gone into it. Like I'm sure you did, I read through a lot of the comments that came in regarding this, and a lot of them were negative. But responding to several of them, it is important to recognize that passing this ordinance doesn't limit these rentals in all areas. It still allows them in WB3 and resort residential, simply limits them in our residential areas. I know from experience what being a digital nomad, these remote workers, is like, and these 30-day rentals are very appealing. However, having a neighborhood turn over every 30 days is not a way to build community or culture, and it's not the kind of Whitefish that I think we want. While I don't expect this proposal is going to solve all of these issues, there's still the issue of enforcement. I think this is a great step forward, and we encourage you to move forward with it. I would also like to encourage you to trust your city staff and the legal advice they've given you. So, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruben. Who's next?
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. My name is Erica Werdala, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the Northwest Montana Association of Realtors, approaching 1,280 members strong this week. And they all had to go to their Christmas parties tonight, so they sent me, who didn't get invited. But we did submit written comment, and I would like to just expound on 3 of those. And we are opposed to the proposed ordinance and the midterm rental portion only. We feel that the short-term rental and the strengthening of the enforcement is a great idea, and the application fees. But midterm rentals serve a unique portion of your population. These are not your tourists that are coming in for a couple of days to stay at Glacier, go up to Glacier Park and come back. These are needed rentals for people at the hospital. I've heard from several realtors that many people that stay on these rentals are in between houses. They're waiting for something to be built. They're waiting for somebody to close so that they can move in, things like that. So this is not your typical tourist that would capitalize on this type of a rental. We also feel that rules that are created should be enforceable, and not having a compliance person at this time makes things extra difficult. Having midterm rentals, it just seems like that's a way for a lot of things to go even further underground and be more illegal if it's only complaint driven. So we felt that until a compliance person gets in and you're able to enforce these, maybe just pass ordinances that can be enforced in the short term here. I also wanted to just comment that when the realtors brought forward the short-term rental text amendment to the county, it was a very packed public hearing at the planning board and at the county commissioner stage. And many people that came to the podium time and time again spoke about how important this short-term rental income was to pay their mortgage so that they could stay in their home, so that they could send a kid to college or pay some medical expenses, that they needed this income. When this came to public hearing before you 2 weeks ago, I had phone call after phone call from our realtor property members who say, this will decimate my business. So I don't see that swapping out A for B and the winners and losers on this one is a good thing to do. And that with housing is at such a priority and such a crisis level, every opportunity should be made to incentivize rentals at all levels instead of having vacant homes or illegal midterm rentals. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Who's next? Please don't hesitate to line up so we can keep the meeting running efficiently, if you don't mind.
Okay. Hi, I'm Susie Schweikert, 5-Star Rentals, 704 Baker Avenue. Since 1995, 5-Star Rentals has been serving Whitefish in the area of residential property management business. We provide homes, duplexes, condos for single families. We are not a commercial business, as has been suggested. I'm going to talk about a few points that we have seen from our experience as property management and doing this every single day. Thank you, Councilwoman Rebecca, for the phone call today. That was helpful for me as well. In pointing out the dire need for low-income employee housing for many employees, this would apply more to commercial housing. We do not provide this. We provide single-family homes. I would offer an alternative, as commercial businesses such as the Garden Wall Inn, Firebrand, Marriott, Town Suites, Whitefish Lake Lodge, or motels can house your emergency need in a commercially contracted manner with an owner that is commercial. We do not rent to revolving door roommates. For years, we have housed seasonal workers as they come to us with specific time frames and needs for furnished housing. These people often do not need a 3-month rental. What we've seen from time and again is a need for a 1 to 4 month rental with flexibility. As we sit now, we're able to provide this because we can customize rentals over 30 nights. If you take away our ability to do so, you'll be further adding to the housing need for our many seasonal workers. My owners purchased land and have had homes for anywhere from 10 to 20 years, yet without as much as a public letter to them, the town, you are trying to force changes to their land rights. We have experienced, though, many times the city has sent written letters to homeowners about other city meetings and changes that we've gotten in the form of an envelope to our business. However, they did not send a letter for this huge change. This is baffling to us and to our owners and lacks integrity. Your own words used to describe what will happen to their homes are to force long-term housing. And then you've asked our homeowners individually if they're interested in being on a registry list, personally contracting with a company to house workforce housing. I thought you wanted to regulate commercial business. I'm sorry. You have suggested you would rather have a lower economic demographic and increased number of roommates housing next door to you, rather than a single family or even a single person. This makes no sense when you say you would like to keep your neighborhoods more family-oriented. This would contribute greater to the problem now by taking away homes that are needed for essential housing. Our families, seasonal workers, cancer patients, nurses, radiologists, and others are simply not interested in renting high-end luxury condos for ridiculous amounts, where they will have to fight traffic in and every day. We do provide reasonable priced houses in our residential zones, and we take pride in that. Our homeowners of Whitefish Lake and River will no longer be able to share with you and I a month on the water for a reasonable price. The reality of lake life is that people do want, is that people do not want a whole summer. This is why vacation rentals in Whitefish Lake Lodge and others are so prosperous during summer months. The people with more flexibility can come for a month or more. If you demand a 3-month lease for homes in these areas, it is absolutely ridiculously expensive. This again plays into the hands of big developers who want to monopolize our most valuable natural resource. Absentee owners, who are the ones presumably renting their monthly zoned homes short-term, will continue to do what they want from afar with no consequences, while the punishment unjustly falls on the homeowner, the hands-on, community-engaged caretakers, and our respectful guests, who are doing everything right and want to do everything right. I personally know what's required in medium-term rentals. We call them short, long-term rentals. We've been operating this way for quite some time. This is my business, and I do this every single day. They're not easy as they're furnished. They're meant for one guest or one family. They're not a commercial property by any means, and they're not meant for large groups of seasonal workers. Is this the Whitefish that you want? I personally don't. I love owners wanting to come home and also appreciate the guests they share with their home with. Many guests are Whitefish residents. Taking this away without full disclosure is a lack of character and respect for them as homeowners with properties on Whitefish Lake, Whitefish River, and our precious residential streets. By limiting them, you are handing over their guests to who? Who are you supporting if you aren't supporting landowners that have been here for 20 years? The way that it looks like you're supporting big development and short-term rental resort zoned areas, which are also the new proposed midterm areas. Not only have they purchased our homes that provided valuable workforce long-term housing, those areas zoned changed to resort residential short-term rentals and now midterm. You have already changed your zoning to benefit big developers. Now you're proposing changing the zoning of your residential areas to again benefit them, but also to hurt your own citizens and homeowners. This will further bottleneck the traffic in our beautiful town and hurt it in such a way that it will never go back. I'm almost done. Each of my owners has written a letter in objection to this. Your process was a surprise and failed to include the homeowners in definition or written word for WR2 and 3 zones. It was alone a refusal to support them or their valuable properties. A clear complaint was written in the paper that is simply unfounded, as we are not commercial, and being called a motel is insulting. We are residential property managers that have a few homes zoned in monthly areas and not very many. We are hardly the problem. I do stand for our owners as they are the foundation of Whitefish, and that includes probably everybody in this room. They represent character, engagement, stewardship, all things sustainable, not to mention responsibility and accountability. We have not seen one legitimate complaint from an owner who is a neighbor to one of our homes or a negative impact study on midterm rentals. If they are not in paper or written form, we have a hard time believing these complaints are anything other than speculation. In this case, please consider voting no to this amendment, as it came out of a desire to push low-income housing into residential areas. Please consider putting large groups of seasonal employees in your commercial hotels, inns, and lodges, or better yet, approve of a building for them instead of more luxury short-term rentals, which we have had enough of. The problem we have is the big developers who refuse to house and take care of their own employees. I know because I house some of them. Iron Horse, the Firebrand, Whitefish Lake Lodge, and many restaurants, to name a few. Last week alone, I had 3 Iron Horse workers call for summer housing that I am currently working on. Furthermore, after Christmas, I will have to tell our 444 Central Avenue renters, 6 of them, who are some of my last low-income apartment renters, that they will need to find new housing, as a San Francisco company purchased and plans to put in redeveloped housing that these tenants will never be able to afford. It took me personally 1 week to come up with 2 sound alternatives to this amendment. I shared them with you and they would both benefit the city while also maintaining consideration for our homeowners' current zoning rights. It seems to me a little more effort. We could work together to come to a more reasonable solution, but at this point I do not see how we can be anywhere close to a decision. Again, I would like to stress that I am more than willing to discuss this further. Thank you for your time. So I'm hoping that we vote no.
Thanks, Susie. Just a reminder to the audience, if you did submit written comments, we have reviewed your comments prior to the meeting, so if you don't mind not reading what you've already submitted, I would appreciate it. Who's next?
Joelle Maxwell, 25 West 2nd Street. I've been a property manager in this town since 2000. In 2016, I started managing nightly rentals. 30 to 90-day rentals are and have always been a necessity in this town. By restricting them to the nightly zones, you will eliminate affordable 30 to 90-day rentals. There are homes in the residential zones that have been renting on a monthly basis for years in Whitefish, long before Airbnb and VRBO. The owners of these properties stay off and on throughout the year. Some of the owners now depend upon this income for retirement, mortgage, and property taxes. In turn, you have tenants that are only looking to rent 1 to 3 months. They are here to recreate, work, and visit family. They cannot afford a nightly rate for 1 to 3 months. I have clients that own a triplex. They rent 2 units at an affordable rate to 2 Whitefish working class families. When they are not occupying the 3rd unit, they rent it at a higher monthly rate. By doing this, they are able to keep the rent affordable for the 2 long-term units. With the new revisions, this will be considered illegal and finable. The majority of the monthly rentals in the residential zones will not become affordable long-term housing with the zoning revisions. These units are owner-occupied off and on throughout the year. I ask you to please vote no. Thank you.
Thanks, Joelle. Who's next?
David Schumer, 716 Birch Point Drive. I'm with my wife in agreement that we are opposed to this amended change to the ordinance, partially because the nightly rental zones, like she just said before me, if you can rent nightly at a high rate, you're not going to rent monthly or for 3 months at a lower rate. People own and buy those properties at a higher value, and they're going to try to maximize the return. They're buying the short term for nightly rentals. So you're going to effectively eliminate the 30 to 90 day rentals. The 30 days, everybody comes up and says it's a new tenant every month. I think we've been renting our place since we bought it from my parents. When my mom, who lived here, they lived here for 60 to 70% of the year until her health didn't allow her to stay in the altitude. And so we were able to buy it thanks to Whitefish Credit Union, who we have our mortgage with. And, sorry, lost my train of thought there. But we rent, my dad's side is rented long-term. It's not affordable housing. It's on the river right near the lake. He bought it in 2001 at a much, lower price than real estate is to now in Whitefish. And it's a year-round tenant, and I don't think he's ever had a tenant stay there for 1 year. They're there until they finally either have to move out or buy something on their own. Our place is furnished because my parents live there. And so we are intending to move here in 5 to 7 years when our kids are off the payroll and we can come and semi-retire and work and enjoy the rest of our life. But we have to sustain it somehow. And the 30-day rental is not a 30-day max. Everybody's saying it's a new tenant every month, new tenant every month. We've had tenants in there for 3 months. We've had tenants in there for 1 month. We've had tenants in there for 2 months. It varies based on the need. It could be a worker in the winter. Someone could rent it. It's vacant. Y'all are trying to change a rule, and it's going to impact. It's going to eliminate that period. You're not going to have that in the short-term zone, and you can't have it in the long-term zone. So the 30 to 90-day rental is going to be gone out of Whitefish. One alternative, I work in planning, and I'm usually on the other side. I'm usually the one getting beat up. But conditional use. You hear the CUP all the time. If a lot of people have told me to not offer this up as one of your, if this is inevitable, that I know it's tough to deny once you go through planning commission and it's recommended for approval. But if properties outside of the 30-day rental who've been operating as 30 to 90-day midterm rentals can operate under a conditional use permit. People that are already operating could be administrative, and then anybody that buys a house, they're restricted to the 90-day minimum unless they go to the planning board and request a conditional use in addition to that. That would just be a way as a compromise to let the property managers and real estate agents and owners who still have property and operate this way to continue to operate. If we move out here and we live there for 2 or 3 years, it expires, and we would have to come to the planning board if we wanted to switch back and do it again. That way the city could also regulate that you can't register midterm rentals, but this is a way where if you get a permit, you could. And you would know who's doing it, and you'd be able to try to figure out who's violating it, and work on your enforcement actions. So that's just my thoughts. Thank you for the time, and thank you for extending the meeting and allowing us time to speak.
Thanks, David, appreciate that. Who's next?
Lauren Osolaski, 632 O'Brien. So we've had 2 work sessions around this change, City Council, and you've unanimously directed staff to draft these changes and to legally vet the ordinance, and then the changes unanimously passed the planning board. So the op-ed I wrote for the paper is included in your packet. I'm sure you've read it. But to address why 90 days, the intention behind this, the problem we have in Whitefish is twofold. We have over-visitation. Our town is just swollen with tourists, and we have a really limited pool of workforce housing. So the intention behind this is to not necessarily bring homes back into workforce housing, but to stop the hemorrhaging that's happening. Our town is just losing homes left and right. Property values are going up. More and more homes are coming out of long-term rentals and going into short-term rental pool. Just around the corner from where I live, there are 2 homes that are listed on one of the property management websites as 30-day furnished rentals. And they could be long-term. They look like a home that would be long-term. These aren't these fancy houses on the lake that aren't going to go back into an affordable housing situation. So I want to remind you that this isn't about necessarily correcting. It's also about just stopping what's happening. Council, you also know that the Montana Constitution really prohibits us from doing a lot of things. And we're also in a really unique situation where we had the foresight to zone areas that will allow for short-term rentals, which is pretty unique in Montana. So we already have neighborhoods that are allowed to have nightly rentals, that are allowed to have 30-day rentals. What we're asking you to do is protect the integrity of our neighborhoods for neighbors, so that way we can have homes for our workforce. So yeah, that's what I've got. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Lauren. Tony.
Tony V. Seth, 1014 8th Street East in Whitefish. It was good for me to come here and listen to people tonight, and one of my big, I guess, soapbox things lately has been respecting the past and plan and embrace the future, because the future of Whitefish is here. It's good to hear from the 5-star people, from people like Joelle, who represent people that have been around a long time, that have owned properties, that are trying to get them out to people to get, yeah, exactly, share what we have here. I think there's a whole other group of people that we need to address, and that's that we've all seen it the last year and a half. A lot of people that are moving to Whitefish that don't necessarily need to become a part of the community, don't look at what's best for Whitefish and what's best for our town, but they were leaving where they were coming from, and they came here and they were able to buy stuff, and they need to make their basis, and so rent's gone up. I think what we're trying to do is preserve our community of what we still have here, and yet legally be within bounds of how we can kind of control the growth that we've been seeing. Yes, we have, thank God, we have 30-day, 60-day, 90-day rentals for the traveling nurse people, the folks that just want to be here for a while. I do know for a fact that a development south of town, you know, that was proposed as affordable housing, you know, cash in lieu of affordable housing, all of a sudden, I'm talking to the realtors that are representing those properties, and they're saying, yeah, the 30-day rental market's huge for us right now. And they're advertising these units as buy these because the 30-day rental is such a profitable way to go. They're still taking those out of the affordable workforce housing zone of what could be there. Even the development that you heard me talk about a couple of years ago next to me, you know, the realtor advertisement on that one was, you know, these units qualify for the 30-day rental market. Live in it when you want to and realize exponential, you know, profits when you're not living in it. So you're starting to see, you know, people just coming and going, And that affects the community. And you guys all know, you've heard me talk a lot about community up here. We're trying to maintain our community, even houses in my neighborhood, the avenues, as our realtors so affectionately refer to my neighborhood as. A lot of people have bought these homes knowing that they can't rent them short term. And this is just the last couple of years, the growth that we've seen recently. They're renting them out, you know, for 30 days or longer with the intention of knowing that those people are never going to be in them for 30 days. They might be in there a week or two, and then they're gone, and it's back up on as a 30-day rental. So the intention is never going to be to keep that thing as 30 days or longer. That's just a way, it's a workaround. Humans are smart that way. And then what we're also seeing is just with the new 30-day rental market out there, you know, we're seeing a lot of dark houses in our neighborhoods where, you know, Halloween this year, walking up and down Columbia and Summers and Kalispell, there were more dark houses than there were houses that had families living in them and trick-or-treaters visiting. And I know I'm hitting you on an emotional level here with our community, but we're changing, and I guess what we're trying to figure out is just a way to, again, respect the past, and people that are doing it the right way, if we can differentiate that somehow. But yet the new people that are moving in, just because they bought their second and third home and have some money left over to buy a couple of rentals. I mean, I know a guy that bought some of those townhouses south of town just south of town, and they bought a dozen of them. And none of them were ever intended to be for the community and for workforce housing and things like that. I guess my other last note is, and with what Angie was saying, and just what makes me nervous is, I know how much work you guys did with the inclusionary zoning thing. My God, thank God we had Ben and Steve and you and everybody working on the inclusionary zoning thing. The last thing I want to see is put a lot of effort into this, a lot of money, a lot of studies, to then just have somebody at the state level just shut us down again. So I just hope whatever decision you make is legal, and that we just aren't going to get shut down at the state level. And if there's anything we can do as a community to address issues at the state level, county level, let me know how I can help you out and figure something out, because I hate to see all this work go into this zoning stuff just to have somebody from Billings go to Helena and just shut it all down because we're not being fair to developers. So that's my 2 bits. I just want to say let's respect the past and do what we can to plan for the future, because as we all know, it's changing so rapidly. It's taken us all off guard, but I know that because we have all you really smart people up there that get paid too much to do what you do, we can figure this out. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate the comments.
Nathan Dugan, 937 Kalispell Avenue. Apologize for missing the last meeting. I was having fun in Argentina. Oh man, I totally lost my train of thought. I'm sorry, guys. Didn't have anything prepared here. I fully support everything that's in this ordinance. First off, I think Dave did a great job writing it. Little bit of information about myself, I guess, that kind of puts me in an interesting place in this debate. I am currently a remote worker. I have rented places in other places I've lived in my house on Airbnb. I am currently a landlord, rent out 2 rooms in my house. I have been a travel physical therapist on travel contracts and had to rent places short term. I just had somebody move out of my house 2 months ago that was the Wolf Tech for FWP this summer. So somebody that lived in my house for a short period of time, which I think is obviously beneficial. And I think it's interesting, the conversation around the medium-term rental aspect of this whole thing is, at least from what I've seen, not even related to what's actually written in the ordinance that Dave wrote. The FWP Wolf Tech that lived with me for 3 months, or maybe even a little bit less, over the summer would still be allowed to do that. Me, as a travel physical therapist, if I came here on a contract, would still be allowed to do that at anywhere in the city. That stuff is not targeted by this ordinance, and I think that you all understand that. It doesn't seem like many people who have come up and spoken against that understand that aspect of it. It's just targeting, and it's specifically worded in the ordinance. It's only for remote workers and tourists. those are the only people that are affected by that. I don't think there's a problem with that personally. So I just want to put my support behind it. I think that it's a good way to go, and yeah.
Thanks for the comments. Who's next? Further public testimony? Chris.
Chris Coughlin, Hagen Heights, Whitefish. I support your ordinance. I think that short-term rentals have been destroying neighborhoods across the country, and you know, we certainly have our issues here. I think the new norm is longer vacation working, you know, destinations. We are definitely one of those. That, you know, 30 to 60 day thing, you know, 2 months, you know, if they're gonna work. When Dave says they're gonna screen, like, you know, is someone working? You know, I guess the question there would be, are they working for the community, or are they working remotely for somewhere else? If they're working for the hospital, I'm all in. You know, I'm not sure how you're gonna address that line between some of the folks that have been renting, you know, through that. I know in Kalispell Regional, when it was Kalispell Regional, they used to have a pool of houses that were rented. I'm told they maybe don't do that anymore, that the hospital here doesn't do that so much anymore, but they do call the local firms. So maybe there's a medium there that you could hit. I think that the people that have been skirting the laws and renting, you know, writing several 30-day contracts in a month, that is, you know, basically doing the short-term vacation rental. It shouldn't be your responsibility for them to make a business out of a house in a residential neighborhood. A residential zone is for residents. That's my theory. Property costs are not as high in a residential zone because you can't make a business out of it. So the people that have bought those houses in smaller, you know, in residential neighborhoods, they didn't pay what you pay in the nightly rental zones. Those nightly rental zones and vacation rental zones and resort residential zones have been there for a really long time. They're not new. Maybe there's a 30 to 60 day zone that we want to look at as a city, you know, as a community. Maybe a neighborhood wants to come forward and say, hey, we think we have the perfect fit for, you know, this thing. But right now, if it's zoned residential, it should be honored as residential. I saw Addie and Roy's letter, and they said, you know, we at least hope you would consider honoring their property management's 2022 reservations, you know, if this ordinance did pass. So there should be some way to look at that. But anyway, I think you're doing a good job, and residential neighborhoods should be for residents.
Thanks, Chris.
Long term.
Good evening, Mariah Joe, 716 Spruce Court. So as a business owner and a member of the Sustainable Tourism Master Plan Committee, and as the current board chair for Explore Whitefish, I have my fingers in a lot of this stuff. And I can tell you that I think we all realize that Whitefish has long had a dedicated contingency of second homeowners. Visitors who became part-time residents when they were here, and have treated our community with the respect and care that we as full-time residents do as well. And the issue that we're now contending with is speculative real estate. And it's having an effect on all of us. And I would say it's having an effect on those long-term part-time residents as well. And they're kind of being lumped in as bad actors in a way that is unfair. The problem is that when you're dealing with capitalistic forces, they kind of lay waste to the entire thing. And they take the good actors down with the bad. They kind of bring all of us with them. And really the only way that you can combat any sort of these capitalistic forces is through legislation. And oftentimes that is after the fact, and it is never a perfect solution to the problem that lays in hand. You're kind of trying to stuff cats back into bags. And we have a lot of good actors within our community, and they may be negatively impacted. And that is beyond unfortunate. The question we have to ask ourselves is, do we preserve their interests to the potential detriment of our entire community? What is before you is by no means a complete solution, and I don't think that we've found the final piece in all of the pieces of this puzzle that will solve all of the problems that are in front of us. It's not just affordable housing. It's not just a runaway train of a real estate market. It's not just workforce housing. It's not just over tourism. It's a lot of different things that are coming together. But I think that this is one necessary piece, and it's a starting place, if for nothing else, that will allow us to continue to work and grapple with this issue, because I think we have to. So I really appreciate your consideration of this issue. I really appreciate the amount of time that you have all put into this, both you as counselors and as well as the staff. Just thank you.
Thanks, Mariah. Who's next?
Hi, I'm Mary Curtis. I'm one of the property owners that will be affected by this ordinance, and we're clients of 5 Star. We live on Geddes Avenue. We do not rent long-term, nor do we rent low income. And regardless of what happens with this ordinance, we will not rent long-term, and we will not rent low income. We spend a portion of our year in Whitefish. We consider ourselves to be residents of Whitefish. We donate to the charities in the community. We contribute to the economy. Our property turns over about 3 times a year. Sometimes it's for a month, sometimes it's for 4 months. Yes, maybe the 1 month person is a tourist. The 4 people stay longer. They work the mountain. They are nurses at the hospital. A lot of different kinds of individuals need shorter term rentals. We are not speculative investors by any sense of the word. But if this passes, we will be one of those dark houses that someone referred to. I think there will be a lot more dark houses around than there are today. Finally, I really encourage you to consider the purpose for this ordinance. I keep hearing a lot of different ideas about people who want this. I've heard, well, there's over-visitation, and this is the way we can stop the tourists from coming in. I assure you that this ordinance will not stop over-visitation. There's absolutely no way this is going to affect over-visitation. I've heard we want to improve our neighborhood quality. I've heard we want to control growth. I've heard we want more low-income housing. So what really is the purpose of this ordinance? And think very clearly about whether this ordinance is going to achieve your objectives. If there's just a multitude of objectives of this ordinance, there's no way to ever determine whether it was effective or not. And I really think that this may be an easy target, but probably not the most effective target.
Thank you, Mary. Michelle, we'll return to remote comments here shortly. Let's get through the audience first. Who's next? Lisa.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Jones. I reside at 314 Blanchard Hollow in Whitefish. My husband and I own 5 properties in Flathead County, 3 of which are in the city limits and are long-term rentals. And I'm a 32-year citizen of Whitefish, feeling very fortunate to own these properties and have a nice place to live. Converging factors are where we are today, and we are not alone. Many mountain communities are facing similar challenges and have many creative solutions, as I know you have reviewed and are continuing to do. This is not the solution for affordability. That issue is being addressed by other options the city is working on, and I applaud you for those efforts. I understand there are many pieces to the puzzle of housing, and I support all of the efforts that are going on and encourage you to make this step to keep Whitefish neighborhoods local. 90 days is a good fit for those that want a hybrid of renting their house out for the summer at a higher rate and living it in the rest of the year, or renting it out to a 9-month rental for the very much needed workforce that we have. But the market will determine the rate, and people are willing to pay it, and everybody knows that you can name your price right now. So we're not here to try to give this stuff away. We're here to try to maintain the integrity of the neighborhoods of Whitefish. And that is the problem that we're having. These are all these changes that we're having. We're losing these things. We're seeing these revolving doors, and we used to have neighbors that we chatted with and had coffee with and disagreed with and still loved each other. So we have all, we all know, and we've heard from others that we are, oh, sorry, I got that part. I had to write this down because I wanted to be brief. I think since this ordinance has also has a clause for healthcare workers, which is obviously an issue that has been brought up, that is being addressed. And I just want to support this ordinance, fully realizing that it will change my ability to rent my places for 30 days in the future, knowing that it's more important to keep the integrity of the neighborhood than to try to make the latest quick buck. Thank you for your time and efforts again.
Thanks, Lisa. Rhonda.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Councilor Hennon, thank you so much for your service. Really appreciate it. Sorry to see you go, but thank you. Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. As Lisa said just now, we have a convergence of issues. One is visitation or over-visitation, if you want to call it that, in the summer months. One is the high cost of all housing. One is the availability of affordable housing. And this definition change kind of is the collision of all those things. And as you know, I have worked in those 3 areas for a really long time, literally decades, and especially in the tourism arena. So I would like to present to you that, in fact, maintaining the integrity of our neighborhoods is the core of our tourism economy. We are special because we have a unique character. We are a real town of real people who live and work here. And a lot of those real people live in the neighborhoods that have been invaded in the last year and a half by speculative real estate interests. People have been buying the houses at escalated prices because they can short-term rent them for, quote, 30 days and generate revenue to help pay for the higher mortgage costs. So they're bringing in more visitors than we could normally house in our community, an average of 6.2 people per short-term rental, not a normal hotel room of 2 people, 6.2 people. Houses that would house 2 or 3 people have 6 people in them, in neighborhoods where we never had any visitors. So we have a much higher number of visitors roaming our streets in the summer than we could conceivably house normally, but it's because we have added, quote, hotel rooms by converting our homes where our families lived into quasi-hotel rooms in the neighborhoods. This is not good. It's not good because we don't have people living in them. It's not good because we have way more visiting bodies than we can handle as a community. We don't have the infrastructure for it. So if you, for instance, we added 160 short-term rentals in the city limits between March 31st and September 31st of this year, 160, that can average 6 people per unit. That's 960 more people every day in July and August. Our hotels have not increased their occupancy percentage in years. Their highest occupancy was in 2017. It has hovered in a similar level, which is its normal pretty full level, ever since. The increase in all of these people that you see and that make you crazy, the traffic, and just masses of people, are being housed somewhere. Ask yourself where. It's in these short-term rentals. And some of those are in our neighborhoods where it should not be allowed. The 30-day rule is a loophole, and you all know it because it's happening in every one of your neighborhoods. You see it. You see people who clearly don't live there walking down the street in these packs. And the next week, it's a different bunch, and they're there on a 30-day rental. So this needs to be addressed. I think this is a very good way to do it, and I hope that you will go forward with it. I think a lot of the arguments raised have been straw men, you know, the hospital worker and so on. Those are addressed in this. This is just strictly to keep our neighborhood homes in the market for people who live and work here, and I hope that you will pass it. I just want to remind you that in 2010, the City Council adopted the Montana Tourism Charter, which calls for basically sustainable tourism. We identified that there were potentials for very bad things to happen in our community as a result of tourism. And so the number one course of action in the Tourism Charter, which you adopted, is to maintain the integrity of place and destination appeal. And the action under that is to encourage tourism business strategies that emphasize long-term economic and social benefits to communities. This would be helping with the long-term social benefit to our community, and I urge you to keep that in mind. I also want to remind you that tourism is a very powerful force. There's a proverb that compares it to fire. Fire can cook your dinner, or it can burn your house down. Our house is on fire. This isn't something we can deal with in a year or two. It's happening to us right now. When properly managed, tourism can be a powerful force. Improved quality of life for residents, protection of natural resources and jobs, but it can also bring negative impacts. Sustainable tourism is needed as a way to develop and manage tourism to ensure that the positive impacts are maximized and the negative impacts are reduced. Implementing sustainable tourism requires buy-in and support from those who are impacted by tourism, including residents, businesses, and employees. That's why you formed a Sustainable Tourism Management Committee, and that's why they developed a Sustainable Tourism Management Plan, which you adopted in September of 2020, 142 pages. Under high priority actions on page 2 of the executive summary, number 1 action is address the short-term rental problem. Sustainable tourism requires a considerable amount of proactive planning and continual assessment of tourism's impacts on the destination. As tourism destinations change over time, the positive and negative impacts of tourism change as well, and that's what we're seeing. This is a fast-moving freight train. Community and industry leaders must be proactive and collaborate to identify who is being impacted by tourism and what impacts they are experiencing. They must be willing to adapt plans and policies to ensure that the positive impacts of tourism are maximized. And so I hope that you will take that to heart and act in the interests of the community that you represent. And I thank you all for your service. I know it's hard.
Thanks, Rhonda. Further public testimony this evening?
Hi, my name is Kelly Wazorek, and I live in 27 Mill Avenue, Whitefish. I think I'm here to represent a sort of a segment of the population that I don't think has been represented so far. I've been here for about 7 years. I work for a software company, so I'm remote, and I understand that my, difficulties are not the same as service workers or nurses. But what I do want to say is that this ordinance and this short-term policy is affecting people that are truly looking for long-term rentals. My owners decided to sell in May. I've been there for 7 years. And I moved 3 times over the course of the summer because I couldn't find anything consistent that wasn't 30 days, So I think what these rentals are doing is taking away from actual real long-term properties that people also need as well. And that's my concern, is that I don't want to lose sight of a population that's not nurses and not service workers. They're the most important, and I agree, and I don't think anybody would argue with that. But the other point that I wanted to make is that I'm not sure why we're confusing, maybe I'm confused. Why are we using the word affordable housing in conjunction with this ordinance? Because from my findings is these short-term rentals, they're not affordable. I don't even know if you could be a nurse and afford one. So that's, sort of my question of why we're jumbling up these two topics. Anyway, thank you for listening, and thank you for your service.
Thanks, Kelly. Further comments from the audience? Michelle? Anyone raising their hands remotely?
Okay, so I'll just go down the line that's on the participants list. So first, Gregory Freeman, if you'd like to unmute your mic, please state your name and address.
Hello, I am Gregory Freeman. I reside at 6204 Montera Avenue. I wanted to speak in support of this. We have had problems whenever we get into town of finding a place where our family would be able to live, and we are trying to live here as a year-round resident. The idea that people who own multiple homes would bemoan people who actually want to live and work here as a year-round resident for wanting to be able to find a place where they could rent it just seems ludicrous to me. In a way, they are selling the community in order to profit themselves. Oh, my wife is here as well. She has a comment to add as well, who is Ariel Freeman. She's a nurse. As a teacher, when I applied for my job, I was the only applicant who applied for a job here because of how hard it is to come to live inside of this community. And even then, the place where we have to live in is a 2-bedroom house for 5 people. And it's what we can't afford, but this shouldn't be what the case is by any means. We are losing the people who do work here. The teachers can't afford to work or to live inside the community where they work. Almost everyone that I work with commutes from neighboring communities where the rent is much lower. And the same is true as well for the hospital workers who also can't afford even these 30-day rentals that they are arguing are for hospital workers. I have fully support this, and I would like to see this happen so that people who do want to be residents of Whitefish will be able to find a place to reside one day. And my wife has a comment as well.
Hi, I'm Ariel Freeman, also at 6204 Montera Avenue G. I am a nurse here, and I grew up visiting every year and lived here for several years as a young adult before following my husband to different military bases, and we were finally able to move back. The only reason we were even able to is because I'm a co-owner in a condo at Montera where we're living. That was purchased 10 years ago because unfortunately, even as a nurse and a teacher, we are not able to purchase a home right now or rent even. We would have had to look into Kalispell or Columbia Falls, even though we're both working in Whitefish. We have 3 children. They all are at school at Muldown, and we moved so they could be close to their grandparents and have that family relationship, as well as Montana and Whitefish specifically is a wonderful community. We've been on military bases where people come and go. And I know that many people have been here for generations, and it's a beautiful area. I was hired before even moving here for my job and also had several other offers. The company I work for is currently short staffed, and they're not able to hire anybody. They haven't been able to hire any nurses for a few months. And they are advertised in many different places, but I think because of the cost of being here, people generally aren't coming from out of town. And with the travel nurses, while they're very appreciated, they do cost a lot more money than staff nurses. It's something that I personally looked into before we moved here, and the pay, as opposed to being hourly, is usually several thousand a week. And that is, I mean, it's wonderful that they're able to come and help us because we are short staffed, but it's definitely more expensive, and those costs are passed down to the consumer. And I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. And before that, we moved back to this home. It was a long-term rental because my co-owner and I both believe that it's important for us to have that sense of community, and those people who work here should be able to live here and not be commuting 20-30 minutes, especially in the winter weather. And that we need the service industry, we need teachers, we need healthcare workers, we need people who can live here year round in addition to the tourists. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Okay, Tom Patton, if you'd like to unmute your mic, please state your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Tom Patton, and my wife and I have owned a home at 214 West 6th Street for almost 20 years now. My wife was born and raised in Whitefish, as were many previous generations of her family. I'm here tonight to request that you either table the decision on medium-term rentals or remove them entirely from the proposed ordinance. Everyone that is speaking on this issue is united through their love of Whitefish and the community. We empathize with the critical need for workforce housing. My wife told me that when she was growing up in Whitefish in the 70s, the people used to live in Whitefish and commute to Kalispell as the cost of living was lower than it was in Whitefish. This was back when it was a logging and railroad town, not the major tourism destination that it is today. Everyone has their own ideas on how best to manage the growth in Whitefish, but the one thing that is absolutely necessary is everyone's collaboration on this issue. We stand a far greater chance of success working together rather than creating divisiveness among the various groups. Medium-term rentals are not short-term rentals and should not be lumped into the same category. Medium-term rentals are primarily families or couples that are working remotely, vacationing, displaced due to fire or floods, or between housing. They assimilate very well into the neighborhoods and contribute to the community. They create a minimal footprint on those neighborhoods, unlike short-term rentals that are much more intensive and have guests coming on a daily or weekly basis. The people that own these homes did not purchase them to operate part-time hotels. They purchased them as they loved the location, the neighborhood, the community, and wanted to live in them as much as their schedules allow. And when they're not there, they often rent them out for 30-plus days as permitted by the zoning. The alternative is for the houses to sit vacant many months out of the year, which benefits no one. It is unrealistic to think that if this ordinance is passed in its current form, that these owners will start doing long-term leases to local residents. Nor will it dissuade people from purchasing in these neighborhoods if they are not full-time residents. It has been tried in other communities without success. The changing of a legally zoned use is not to be taken lightly and requires full disclosure and opportunity for adequate public comment. The ban on medium-term rentals in residential zones was not well communicated prior to the December 6th meeting and came as a complete surprise to property management companies and owners. There is a much wider audience that should be involved in these conversations before a decision is reached. We are all in agreement that it is imperative to ensure the health and vitality of our town of Whitefish for the local residents while creating a path forward for sustainable tourism. There is no magic silver bullet, but I am confident that the Whitefish community can develop a plan that will create real solutions to the problems at hand. Unfortunately, banning medium-term rentals is not one of those solutions that will be effective. So in closing, I repeat my request to either table the decision on medium-term rentals or remove them entirely from the proposed ordinance. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. It is greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, Kevin Kulo, if you'd like to unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Kevin Kulo, my wife's Britton Kulo. We own a home at 710 Birch Point. We've been coming out to the area for a number of years. Fell in love with Glacier, purchased a home a year and a half ago or so, and have been renting it out as a medium-term rental under the new sort of definitions since that time to a wide range of people. But in no way would you consider it affordable housing or short-term rental. We didn't want that. This is our home. We don't want the traffic. Our neighbors don't want the traffic. We know our neighbors. We've met them. Every time we come out to visit, we go out to dinner. They're lovely people, and we wouldn't want to do anything to disturb the neighborhood, and have not. What you have here is a problem that this ordinance is not targeting. Okay, the problem is an enforcement problem with short-term rentals, and it sounds like there's not even a code enforcement person in the offing here. This is not going to fix that problem. What the answer on that is, I don't know. Increased enforcement in some form, but punishing the medium-term rentals isn't going to get you there. Before we bought our house, it sat empty for approximately 3 years. Dark houses are a problem. I mean, I have a law enforcement background, and I will tell you that up front. When we got our house and started to rehab it and fix it up, we discovered where a homeless person or a homeless railroad train hopper, because we're right on the rail line, had been living underneath our back deck. That was an interesting discovery. The housing problem is real, and there's no question about that. It's great that property values are going up and everyone's got more equity, and that's a wonderful thing, and everyone's happy about that. But regular people need a place to live. You know, it's great that property values go up, but who's going to answer the phone when you dial 911? Who's going to police your streets? Who's going to teach your children in school? Who's going to take care of you in the ER? Who's going to fix your vehicle when it breaks down, right? I mean, I hear the comments from the nurses and some of the other folks in town, and I feel those. I do. But this is not the solution for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, Brian Schott, if you'd like to unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Brian Schott, 708 Lupfer Avenue in Whitefish. I think this choice for 90 days will stop some of the bleeding and return some homes into longer-term rentals and ownership. It's a really tough choice, and it will have a negative impact on some. But I think weighing these choices right now, we have to give tremendous weight to community, character, and livability. Whitefish is being treated as an extractable resource. The pirates have come into town, and this would be a clear vote that while acknowledging that this change is imperfect, it's not perfect. It is a vote for keeping our community intact. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, Kelly Talsma, if you'd like to unmute your mic and state your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Kelly Talsma, and I live at 361 Shady River Lane. I'm hiding in the airport bathroom right now, so sorry for the extra noise. I'm a retired teacher. I'm retired president of the Teachers Union and also a realtor. And I just want to bring up the fact that I've had many conversations with teachers that a way that they could afford housing in Whitefish is to rent out during the summer and over the Christmas break. And so they can afford housing and supplement their income by those rentals that may not be 60 to 90 days, but the shorter 30 days that doesn't ruin the neighborhood and that keeps our teachers in our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, John, I think that's the last of the list online.
Okay, a couple people walked in. Any public comment on this item? Thanks. With that said, I will close the public hearing and turn it back to the council, and I'd prefer a motion one way or another just to keep the meeting moving.
Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 21-20, an ordinance amending Title 11 of zoning regulations, Chapter 3, special provisions, short-term rental standards, and Chapter 9, definitions of the Whitefish City Code.
Thanks, Steve. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilor Fury. Steve, would you like to speak to your motion?
I'd like to make an amendment to my motion, if that would be okay. I would like to make an amendment to remove all language that references midterm rentals at this point. That clear? Would that be clear enough for you, Dave, to do that?
There's a friendly amendment on the table to remove all language specific to midterm rentals. Is there a second to that friendly amendment? Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Steve.
All right. I get it. I think anybody that knows me in here knows that I get the problem. What I've found tonight is that this is a fascinating discussion about what's happening to our town. There's a lot of emotion here. There's a lot of stories about people that are affected by not only having this opportunity, and also the effect on our community, on our neighborhoods that are suffering from it as well. And anybody who knows me knows that I understand this problem, and that's why I'm here. That's why I was elected, is to try to work on this problem. We do suffer from overvisitation. Our house is on fire. So is my frustration every time I leave to go get groceries. Our neighborhoods should be for neighbors, and we all question whether that's still the case in our town anymore. At the same time, I just don't see how we're going to get away with this in the state's eyes, and I'm the first one to say we should fight the state on anything that they want to throw at us, but this also targets certain classes of people and say one class is okay to rent, one class is not okay to rent. And that is not, I can't stand by an ordinance that does that, because that is a very tricky situation to get into. The intention here is good. We have the right ideas here, that the people, we don't want to allow any more over-visitation in our town, but this doesn't get us there in the way that we need to get there. We need to find a way to make this work more effectively and more appropriately, which would be through, we heard an idea about conditional uses. I think it has to change. We have to change some of the language in our residential zoning to prevent this, rather than doing it as a blanket statement that pushes it to short-term zones and then says it's okay in our residential zones, but only if you're a certain kind of person. And we can do this, and we can do it rather quickly, I believe. We have some ideas already from our property managers that manage these things. We have to pay attention to the unintended consequences of doing this. Again, we have the right idea, we just have to go about it in a different way, and that's the reason for my amendment to remove the midterm language from this.
Thank you, Steve. Further discussion from the council? Ben.
Okay. So I've carefully reflected about this issue for the last week, and I'll admit I've gone back and forth on it a couple times. Ultimately, I am going to vote against this amendment because I do believe that the reasons why we brought this forward in the first place are the right reasons. For me, it's not about where we are today, even though I'm very concerned about where we are today. It's about where we're going to be in the future, because I've said up here before, and I'll say it again, that I feel that the zoning and the regulations and our planning and growth here in town, it just seems like the situation on the ground changes faster than we can react to it. And 30-day rentals, with the advent of Airbnb and VRBO, has changed the landscape of our community. And I think about, I mean, listen, we had a good comment in here today that said, you know, there's some good and there's some bad in this, and I think that's probably true. On one side, we have arguments saying, you know, gosh, you know, these are hotels and it's just a bunch of tourists. And on the other side, it's, you know, it's just the traveling nurses and stuff. And really the answer is probably somewhere in between. But I think ultimately we have a situation where, I mean, a lot of these same arguments against it were probably used back when we passed short-term rental regulations, however long ago, many years ago. And thank goodness we did. And I think the real thing at the end of the day is we can't all rent our properties for 30 days at a time. Otherwise, where will we be? And the answer is nowhere good. So after some thought, I do think that we should pass this here tonight as it is written. And that is where my vote is going to be this evening.
Thank you, Ben. Further comments from the council? Rebecca.
I won't be voting for the amendment either. I don't understand what you mean by different types of people, I guess. And it's heartbreaking. I totally understand where the property management people are coming from and why we should walk this back a little bit, maybe. So I would be more in favor of tabling to another time in January to discuss changes to what's been presented, but not to eliminate completely what we're trying to do, because we are actually in a crisis. I mean, we have policemen that cannot live in town. They're living, you know, 30, 45 minutes away. They can't find housing. That's just one service that we need for essential workers, and so we have to act on something. So I won't be supporting it.
I'd just like to explain, Rebecca, this ordinance clearly says that you're allowed to rent to somebody who is a non-tourist or a remote worker for 30 to 90 days, but you are not allowed to rent to a, wait, did I say that right? Yeah, but everybody else is okay. So you can't, you have to decide, if you're renting it, you have to decide, is this person in this class or in this class? That's what this ordinance clearly says. And in regards to the rest of your comments, we need to do the short-term rental stuff now. That's why I want to approve the short-term rental piece of it. But tabling the whole thing doesn't get our short-term rental stuff done either. Walking it back, but we can, I think we could probably rather quickly come up with something that addresses this issue without trying to determine what kind of person is renting from in this zone. That's really the issue. So I think that's really what I'm trying to say.
Thanks, Steve. Further comments? Andy.
If I can get my mic to turn on there. Steve, I'm not going to be able to support the amendment either. I'm like Ben, I've gone around and around and around about this many, many times, and I'm not naive enough to think that we won't see a challenge, and I'm not naive enough to think that we would survive that challenge in the courts if we do this. I'm not naive enough to think that we won't see some kind of appellate court action down at the state legislature in another session like we typically do, because anybody aggrieved by a municipal decision typically goes to the legislature, John, and that's their appellate court. And even though they're the people that go down there and march and talk about local control all the time, that's not what they really want us to do. I'm also not naive enough to think that this is going to change the affordability of housing in this community, but I'm also not naive enough to know that people don't pay premium prices for homes thinking they're going to rent them for $2,000 a month. They pay premium prices for homes thinking they're going to rent them for $6,000 a month or $7,000 a month for 2 or 3 months of the year. We know that's a fact. I mean, we had one property manager here on December 6th state that, well, my people buy these houses thinking they're going to rent them for X, and now you're going to take that away from them. So I can't sit here and say that it's not affecting our neighborhoods. I can't also say that we're going to gore somebody's ox if we do that. And that's because, like most regulation, whether it's county, state, or federal, or in the national park or whatever it is, that regulation is often drafted to deal with the bad actors, and that's what I'm afraid we're going to have to do here. Will it stay? I don't know. Will we stay at the 90 days over time? But I agree with Rebecca. I think we've got a problem now, and I think this is one way to deal with that. And so I won't support the motion.
Thank you, Andy. Further comments from the council on the amendment? We'll vote on the amendment first. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign. And the motion does fail on a 4-2 vote, which brings us back to the original motion for approval of ordinance 21-20. Further discussion. Frank.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to support this motion, but not without reservation. I, quite frankly, agree with Steve's analysis, and I also agree with Andy. On the other hand, I'm of the opinion I hate throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And that's kind of what we're doing here. So I kind of view it as a ridiculously hard Hobson's choice. If we were just able to legislate what I'll call the bad actors, we'd all be happier. There's just no way to do that. Bad facts make for some very difficult law. Anybody that's been to law school or been in a courtroom, they know that. And so I'm going to support this, but it is not without reservation.
Thank you, Frank. Steve?
I'll just say I'm going to withdraw my support for my original motion, but that's okay. I'll still vote on it. And it's not because I don't think this is a problem. I hope everybody understands that. And anybody who knows me knows that I understand that in full. But we gotta find a way to enforce it, and we don't have that. And we also have to be careful about how we decide who is okay and who's not.
Thank you, Steve. Rebecca?
I really kind of like the idea of a conditional use process for people that could possibly be grandfathered in. And then also the issue about people that have already booked into 2022. I think that's another issue that we should somehow accommodate. So I don't know if we can pass this through, if we get enough votes, and then do text amendments additionally next month? Or do we have to change it in here and add it in here?
I think you'd probably have to add it in for this reading.
Where? Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, let me think. Sorry.
Sure. Dave, maybe you can point Rebecca in the right direction in terms of where she can insert a text amendment to address 2022 bookings.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to figure out a way to make either a portion of it not effective until a certain date, or else have some language in there that would grandfather those bookings until a certain time, which we could add somewhere in there. I'm not sure where right now, but
I'd like to call the question, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I'm just giving Rebecca a moment to.
I guess the reason why I'm saying this is that there is a financial implication to people that are managing their businesses like this, and many of them have said that they're sort of shocked to know that we're doing this. And so I just would like a little bit of grace to help them with this adjustment if we do pass that through.
This goes precisely to my original, my amendment to the motion. This is exactly why I made that. I mean, it's part of why I made that amendment.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where to put it, Dave. Would it be, because I don't really see where the timeline begins.
Well, it's effective, all ordinances are effective when they're adopted, which would be after the second reading. I don't know if this technically is a second reading or if there's another second reading, and then 30 days after that. But, but we could add some language, under the medium-term rentals, if that's the portion of it, that it would then, we could add a clause in there if we're bringing it back for a second reading. I guess that's an Angie question, but since it's already had one reading, I'm not sure. Technically. But we could add
Angie, are you on? Can you address that question, please? Whether or not we could bring a text amendment back that would be read at the second hearing in January? I think you're muted.
We could put it under maybe page 4, 2.
Yeah, we can bring some language back on the second meeting or the first meeting in January, with respect to its effective date.
So we don't have to do it right now, Angie?
I would recommend doing it right now. I'd let staff craft some language.
Does that need to be brought forward tonight as an amendment, Angie, or can it be handled at the next meeting?
I would handle it. I would let staff handle it,
Okay.
just so we're not drafting stuff from the dais.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Thanks, Rebecca. Further comments from the council?
John, it'd be nice to at least have some idea of what that date might be. 6 months, 9 months. It's effective in the summer. I don't know.
Could we say a year, or is that too long? I mean, some people have bookings already out.
Be great for the council to decide as a whole to give us direction, at least when we're going back to drafting an ordinance for a second reading. So if you guys could come up with a date.
Can I just point out that this, I mean, we're just saying we're not in charge of making this work for businesses, but now we are. I mean, it's kind of the point here. Like, we want to address this issue, but now we're going to bend over backwards for some people that have stuff booked out so that we can support their businesses. It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, that was the original, that's the point of taking out the midterm stuff, because the consequences of it are, we don't know what they are exactly, and now we don't know how long to do this for.
Is there any interest from the council on adding additional language to address existing bookings in 2022? Yes? Andy? Yes. Ryan? Okay. Sounds like there is consensus. And Rebecca?
Yeah, I just think it's...
Let's discuss terms. Do we want to deal with just the calendar year 2022? Do we want 6 months?
I would say
or just existing bookings?
Yeah, well, I think we should give them a timeline. I would say the next year. I mean, what I heard from the property managers is they have people that come back every year to book the same properties. And so if that's going to change their plans, they need to work with their clients on maybe other places that might work for them. Or, I mean, if they have repeat customers that are coming back for a decade, they probably should have some courtesy to try to accommodate everybody's plans, including the homeowners. So I think a year would be appropriate, because this is kind of a drastic change for their business practice. But if you want to only do 6...
Is this only going to apply to rental companies, or does it apply to anybody with a
rental
that
companies
could rent 30 days? Okay.
Yeah, property management.
Property management companies. Let's go with a year.
Okay. Thank you guys. It's complex, and I really don't want them to be left out of what we're trying to accomplish and be harmed financially either.
Understood.
To clarify, though, it will be applicable to anybody who has a booking. It can't just be rental companies because it's a wholesale legislative action. So just to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't just.
You can't single out a certain use, correct?
You really can't, no. It's gonna be to anybody that has a booking and, yeah, it's, I mean, if you guys wanna put a year cap on it, that's fine, I think, under state law, but you can't just single out property management companies. It's gonna be even those that have listed their property independently on VBRO or other platform.
So essentially what we're saying is that this doesn't take effect for a year.
The midterm rental portion.
Midterm rental portion.
Yes.
So within that year, we could potentially revise the language to make it better and less discriminatory.
Yes. Further discussion from the
change my
council.
mind.
Ben?
I think that's a good thing. I think delaying the implementation, I was gonna say 6 months, but I'm fine with a year. Gives people a chance to react to it. And I think a lot of it is about signaling the future, right? We're trying to let people know who are looking at buying a house here today that, you know, maybe this is not how you would plan to use this in the future. So I think that would be fine with me.
Thank you, Ben. Further comments? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. please, Steve. Thank you. Yep, let's go, Jake. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting back to order. And we are at item 7B of our agenda, which is Resolution 21-53, a resolution adopting the Long Range Fire Department Master Plan. Chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Back in March, we contracted with AP Triton to produce a master plan for the fire department. On November 1st, they presented during a work session to the council. Then the following night at the O'Shaughnessy Center, we did a public presentation. The master plan included numerous recommendations ranging from staffing levels, capital equipment and facilities, along with fees for services. The big part of the master plan was setting up a strategic planning committee to work through and prioritize these efforts. This time, staff respectfully recommends that the City Council adopt the long-range master plan as presented.
Thank you, Joe. Any questions for Chief Page? Not seeing any. We did advertise for a public hearing on what will be Resolution 21-53, and we'll hold that hearing now. Is there any public testimony tonight? I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for a motion. Ryan.
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve resolution number 21-53, a resolution adopting the Long Range Fire Department Master Plan.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. Just for the record, Steve Quinnell did leave the meeting, and he is excused for the remainder of the agenda. We'll move on to item 8A, which is Resolution 21-54, a resolution now establishing the Fire Department Strategic Planning Committee. Chief.
Okay, you just adopted the master plan, and tonight I'd like to propose that we form a strategic planning committee. The proposal is 5 individuals with representatives from the union, a member from the Whitefish Fire Service Area Board, a city councilor, city manager, and myself. And this committee would serve for no longer than 1 year and prioritize and make plans to adopt many of the recommendations in the committee and the master plan.
Promise it's just going to be a year, Joe?
Well, I can't guarantee what the speed of government is.
That's right. Is there a motion? And I'll just throw this out there for consideration by the council, but I've been working with the chief and others on some aspects of this planning effort for some time now, and I'd be happy to continue in that capacity unless someone else would like to fill my shoes.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to approve Resolution 21-54, resolution adopting 54, resolution establishing the Fire Department Strategic Planning Committee, and appoint you as the council representative.
Thank you, Frank. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Hennon. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that's unanimous. Frank.
And Mr. Mayor, if you need an alternate, I would volunteer.
Great. I'm sure I will from time to time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. You have Dana's report enclosed with the packet. Any questions for Dana tonight? Dana, I think we do need to give you a little bit of direction on the health board appointment. I spoke to Rebecca outside of the meeting, and she mentioned she would like to solicit letters of interest from candidates. That was one idea, and conduct interviews at a date certain. The other is we have, I believe, 2 or 3 applicants that have expressed interest. So I'll leave it up to the council what direction you want to take this. Just so you're aware, it's on page 264 of the packet regarding the Flathead City County Health Board appointment. Ben?
My opinion, for what it's worth, is I feel it would help me to be able to speak with potential applicants for this position just like we would other board positions. I've never met any of the folks who have applied, and based on their letters, I have no doubt that they're very well qualified. But personally, I wouldn't see the harm in asking them to maybe come speak with us one evening.
Great, I agree. Is that the consensus of the council? Okay. Dana, anything further to report on?
Great. I think just as a result of the earlier action that the council took in which they tabled the ordinance for garbage and recycling, curbside recycling program. I'll just give you a brief update. We will continue to work on animal-resistant containers with Republic when it comes to garbage. We do hold that contract with Republic Services, and that was the direction, given of council before. So unless that's changed, we will proceed with that. We'll look at numbers. We'll look at the contract period to see how we can make it affordable for our customers. It is an area that we've been trying to address for some years now. So I'd like to see us continue with that. And then the other one is the central recycling site. So given the need to go back out for a bid or an RFP, whichever we decide is most appropriate, Republic Services has wanted to have in place an MOU for them to continue to service our central recycling site. I will work with Chad on bringing that forward at the next council meeting for your consideration. Obviously, I'm going to estimate the cost could be anywhere between probably $8,000 and $10,000 a month, given they'll probably want us to not only take on the the processing costs, which he'd estimated around that $4,000 to $5,000, but we probably would also need to take on that hauling cost as well. And so we'll bring it forward for council to make a decision then, so that it's in the packet and open to the public as well. But I just wanted to give you that update. Other than that, we are closed Thursday starting at noon at City Hall because of the way that the holidays are being observed this year. For the half-day Christmas Eve, it will be observed actually on Thursday afternoon, and then Friday is in observation of Christmas. So with that, that's all I have to add for tonight.
Thank you, Dana.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, one thought, Dana, I think as you're evaluating an MOU with Republic for the recycling site, I think one of the things we ought to be considering, and I think I would like you to bring back forward to us as part of that discussion, is whether or not we simply eliminate that recycling site altogether in anticipation of potentially going to curbside recycling, given that location, the problems we have with it, the additional costs that would be associated with it. I think that's something we just, as a community, need to consider.
Thank you. Great, thank you, Frank.
I agree with Frank. We'll start with Rebecca this evening. Any comments to share, Rebecca?
Really happy we made it through the year, and hope everybody is having a peaceful time in the next week, and really appreciate the staff working hard through the pandemic. Omicron is like 5 times more contagious than Delta, I think, and so that's the new variant for COVID. So people still need to be cautious out there because we're still could have staffing issues at the hospital, etc. Anyways, just happy holidays. Thank you. And thanks for Ryan. Really fun serving with you, and happy parenthood.
Thanks, Rebecca. Ben?
No comments except to say, yeah, thanks, Ryan. It's been a pleasure knowing you up here.
Ryan? You still have to come to the January 3rd meeting, though, to approve the consent agenda.
Oh, yeah, I'll be here. Yeah, it's an interesting thing growing up here and then leaving and then coming back and, eventually buying a house and getting married and having a kid and kind of seeing how things work from the city, from the inside out. I remember being a kid and walking through Marcus and seeing Andy's name on the paper that he was elected mayor, and I don't know when that was, and just and just to be able to come up here and sit next to him for these past 4 years has been there's no better way to learn about how things really work at the city than sitting up here and really digging in. And I feel like everyone's so smart. They know so much. Staff's incredible. You guys never cease to amaze me. I know Angie's not here, but I mean, Angie's pretty much the standard that I look to, you know, as how I want to be an attorney. And Frank, I just cannot articulate how much I've learned in the last 4 years, just about everything, about how to approach problems, how to think about the future. So I would say, if, you know, who's ever watching, there's a really good group that sits up here, and there's a really good group of staff, and they really care, and they're really diligent, and thank you all for the last 4 years.
Thanks, Ron. Andy?
Thank you, Ron. It's been a pleasure to sit next to you. I've known you since you were very young, obviously. And probably like in high school, raging by the house a little too fast to go down to the neighbor kid's house. And I'm sure I yelled at you once or twice out there, but I'm not exactly sure that happened. It's been a pleasure. You've been a valuable asset to us, and I think that you have learned that it is a pleasant and pleasurable experience, and it's one that you learn a lot from, and it's frustrating at times, and it's never easy, and it's never hard, but you always know that hopefully people out there in the community appreciate what you do. So I'm really, really happy you've been here, and I'm super happy you're going to be a father soon, not that long to go. So that will be great, and I'm sure your parents are excited about that too. So I know they are. So.
Good timing to get off.
I know. Other than that, thanks everyone, staff and public and council. It's never easy up here. We always know that, but I think we all do a good job, and I hope the public does understand that not everybody is satisfied by what we do every time, but I look forward to a new council, and even though it's only going to be one change, and that's the guy back there on his phone right now, but other than that, so. It's the guy back there on his phone, but with the change, it'll be nice. It always is a great way to start out the year with a change in council and a fresh perspective, hopefully. Not that you don't have a fresh perspective, but so happy holidays, everyone.
Thanks, Andy. Frank?
Just happy holidays again to all. This is my parting shot to Richard when he left the council. You'll miss us, notwithstanding. It really has been a pleasure, Ryan, and thank you for being here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at least one more time on January 6th or whenever that is. And on a serious note, on the county health board appointment, Dana, we're going to be able to get that on a interview schedule for the first weekend, the first meeting in January, or not?
Yes, that's our intent,
Okay.
because their first meeting is January 13th.
Yeah.
I believe it's that day. It would be before our second meeting of the council, so I would like to see if we can get the interview scheduled for January 3rd.
Me too. Good. Thank you so much. Anyway, happy holidays all, and it's been a pleasure being with you all this year. Thanks.
Likewise, I'll echo all the comments that have been said about you, Ryan. I think what I particularly enjoyed about working with you is you chose when to speak very carefully, and when you did, they were thoughtful and very compelling arguments that certainly swayed my position on several items. So thanks for your service, and good luck being a father. Look forward to seeing you around town, and I hope to see you up here again one day. So on that note, happy holidays, everyone, and we are adjourned.